Hello, this is Ben Television News Roundup, a compilation of major stories the week ending. I'm Tunde Alabi. Thank you for being part of the program today. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has attacked the Prime Minister's Brexit plan, saying a plan to reduce corporation tax as set out in the Brexit plan would not only impoverish Britain, but it will make it a tax haven for big corporations at the expense of the people. The Prime Minister, Theresa May, stated that her Brexit plan will shape the country into an independent and outward-looking Britain.
This is about our jobs, living standards and future prosperity. Why will it not be scrutinised by this House?
Well, I say to the right honourable gentleman that what I did yesterday was set out a plan for a global Britain. I set out a plan that will put the divisions of last year behind us, that will show a vision for a stronger, fairer, more united, more outward-looking, prosperous, tolerant and independent, truly global Britain. It was a vision which will shape a stronger future and build a better Britain.
Mr. Speaker, restoring parliamentary democracy while sidelining Parliament. Mr. Speaker, it's not so much the Iron Lady as the Irony Lady. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister finally provided some detail. Can I urge her to stop her threat of a bargain basement Brexit, a low-pay tax haven on the shores of Europe? It won't necessarily damage the EU, but it would certainly damage this country, businesses, jobs and public service. She demeans herself and her office and our country's standing by making these kind of threats.
What I set out yesterday was a plan for a global Britain, bringing prosperity to this country and jobs to people and spreading economic growth across the country. But actually yesterday we also learned a little more of the right honourable gentleman's thinking on this issue. What he said was the following. She has said that leave the single market, then at the same time says she wants to have access to the single market. I'm not quite sure how that's going to go down in Europe. I think we have to have a deal that ensures we have access to the market. I've got a plan. He doesn't have a clue.
Mr. Speaker, she made the threat. Mr. Speaker, she was the one who made the threat about slashing corporation tax. If you reduce corporation tax, the lowest common denominator, this country loses £120 billion in revenue. How then do you fund public services as a result of that? Last year, the Prime Minister said leaving the single market would make trade deals considerably harder. And while we could certainly negotiate our own trade agreements, there would be no guarantee that they would be on terms as good as those we now enjoy. But yesterday the Prime Minister only offered us vague guarantees. Can I ask her, does she now disagree with herself?
The right honourable gentleman might also have noticed that when I spoke in the Remain campaign, I said that if we voted to leave the European Union, the sky would not fall in. And look at what has happened, actually, to our economic situation since we voted to leave the European Union. But I say he talks about the future of this economy. I want us to be an outward-looking nation, trading around the world, bringing prosperity and jobs here into the United Kingdom. The one thing that would be bad for the economy is the answers promises that the right honourable gentleman has. He wants a cap on wages, no control on immigration, and to borrow an extra £500 billion. That wouldn't lead to prosperity. That would lead to no jobs, no wages, and no skills.
Mr. Prime Minister, the Chancellor said after the referendum that to lose single market access would be catastrophic. A few days later, the Health Secretary said the first part of the plan must be clarity that we will remain in the single market. The Prime Minister said something about frictionless access to the single market and a bespoke customs union deal. Could the Prime Minister give us a little bit of certainty and clarity about this? Has she ruled out paying any kind of access fee to achieve access to what she describes as a frictionless market?
I can say to the right honourable gentleman that access to the single market is exactly what I was talking about yesterday in my speech. One of the key principles, the key objectives, is that we negotiate a free trade agreement with the European Union that gives us the widest possible access for trading with and operating within the European Union. And he talks about frictionless access. Actually, this was a separate point, which is about frictionless borders in relation to the customs issue. A very important issue for us in relation to our relationship between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And the Taoiseach and I and all parties are absolutely on the single page on this, that we want to ensure that we have the best possible arrangement that does not lead to a borders of the past for Northern Ireland.
The question was, Mr. Speaker, would we have to pay for access to the market or not? The Prime Minister has not given an answer on that. And yesterday she set out a wish list on immigration referring to skills shortages and high-skill migration. Does she now then disagree with the Secretary of State for Rural Affairs, who told an employers' conference, don't worry, you can still have cheap EU labour after we leave the European Union?
The right honourable gentleman talks about access. Yes. The whole point is that we will negotiate a free trade agreement with the European Union that is about the best possible access for British business to operate in the European Union member states and for European businesses to operate here in the United Kingdom. It's about sitting down and negotiating the best possible deal for the United Kingdom. That's what I'm committed to, and that's what this government is going to deliver.
My question was about how much we're going to have to pay to have access to the market. Still no answer. Yesterday she talked about the pressure put on public services by migration. Can I just remind her, as one of her honourable friends did earlier, that at the moment there are 55,000 EU citizens working in our National Health Service, helping to treat all of the people of this country. There are 80,000 care workers helping our mainly elderly people. There are 5,000 teachers educating our children. The real pressure on public services comes from a government that slashed billions from the social care budget, that is cutting the schools budget, that's closing A&E departments and walk-in centres and Sure Start centres. So instead of threatening to turn Britain into an offshore tax haven, let's welcome those who contribute to our public services and fund our public services properly so that we do have the fully functioning NHS that we all need and deserve.
I made clear yesterday, we value those who have come to the United Kingdom and contribute to our economy and our society, and there will still be people coming to the United Kingdom from the European Union when we leave the EU. The crucial issue is that it is this government that will be making decisions about our immigration system for people from the European Union. But yet again, I say to the right honourable gentleman, there is indeed a difference between us. It's very simple. When I look at the issue of Brexit, or indeed at any other issue like the National Health Service or social care, I consider the issue, I set out my plan, and I stick to it. It's called leadership. He should try it sometime.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama has said President Trump will need help and advice from his cabinet members to run a successful government. disclosed these at the White House during his last media chat. Obama, the first U.S. black president, also expressed optimism at the future of America, but reflected on the growing state of inequality.
In his last question and answer session with White House reporters, President Barack Obama says he's given his best advice to the incoming president. But ultimately, he said, Donald Trump's team will hold the greatest sway.
I think a lot of his views are going to be shaped by his advisors, the people around him, which is why it's important to pay attention to these confirmation hearings.
He told the real estate mogul he will need help.
This is a job of such magnitude that you can't do it by yourself.
He defended his decision to commute most of Chelsea Manning's 35-year sentence for leaking classified documents. He said the former Army private had taken responsibility for her actions and already served more time than most people convicted of similar crimes.
It made sense to commute and not pardon her sentence. And I feel very comfortable that justice has been served.
Obama called for a cybersecurity policy to protect against attacks from nations like China and Russia, accused of meddling in U.S. elections. He accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of holding an anti-American stance that made relations difficult. Obama said he plans to spend time with his family and writing this year, but he vowed to speak out as a citizen if he feels the nation's core values are threatened.
I worry about inequality because I think that if we are not investing in making sure everybody plays a role in this economy, the economy will not grow as fast, and I think it will also lead to further and further separation between us as Americans.
He also expressed his signature optimism.
At my core, I think we're going to be okay.
And he encouraged the press to continue to hold future leaders to account.
Good luck.
Meanwhile, Mr. Obama noted that it is in America's and the world's interest that a constructive relationship is maintained with Russia.
I think it is in America's interest and the world's interest that we have a constructive relationship with Russia. That's been my approach throughout my presidency. Where our interests have overlapped, we've worked together. At the beginning of my term, I did what I could to encourage Russia to be a constructive member of the international community and tried to work with the president and the government of Russia in helping them diversify their economy, improve their economy, use the incredible talents of the Russian people in more constructive ways. I think it's fair to say that after President Putin came back into the presidency, that an escalating anti-American rhetoric and an approach to global affairs that seemed to be premised on the idea that whatever America's trying to do must be bad for Russia, and so we want to try to counteract whatever they do. That return to an adversarial spirit that I think existed during the Cold War has made the relationship more difficult, and it was hammered home when Russia went into Crimea and portions of Ukraine. The reason we imposed the sanctions, recall, was not because of nuclear weapons issues. It was because the independence and sovereignty of a country, Ukraine, had been encroached upon by force by Russia. That wasn't our judgment, that was the judgment of the entire international community. And Russia continues to occupy Ukrainian territory and meddle in Ukrainian affairs and support military surrogates who have violated basic international law and international norms. What I've said to the Russians is, as soon as you stop doing that, the sanctions will be removed. And I think it would probably best serve not only American interests, but also the interests of preserving international norms if we made sure that we don't confuse why these sanctions have been imposed with a whole set of other issues. On nuclear issues, in my first term, we negotiated the START II treaty, and that has substantially reduced our nuclear stockpiles, both Russia and the United States. I was prepared to go further. I told President Putin I was prepared to go further. They have been unwilling to negotiate. If President-elect Trump is able to restart those talks in a serious way, I think there remains a lot of room for our two countries to reduce our stockpiles. And part of the reason we've been successful on our non-proliferation agenda and on our nuclear security agenda is because we were leading by example. I hope that continues. But I think it's important just to remember that the reason sanctions have been put in place against Russia has to do with their actions in Ukraine. And it is important for the United States to stand up for the basic principle that big countries don't go around and invade and bully smaller countries. I've said before, I expect Russia and Ukraine to have a strong relationship. They are historically bound together in all sorts of cultural and social ways, but Ukraine is an independent country. And this is a good example of the vital role that America has to continue to play around the world in preserving basic norms and values, whether it's advocating on behalf of human rights, advocating on behalf of women's rights, advocating on behalf of freedom of the press. You know, the United States has not always been perfect in this regard. There are times where we, by necessity, are dealing with allies or friends or partners who themselves are not meeting the standards that we would like to see met when it comes to international rules and norms. But I can tell you that in every multilateral setting, in the United Nations, in the G20 and the G7, the United States typically has been on the right side of these issues. And it is important for us to continue to be on the right side of these issues, because if we, the largest, strongest country and democracy in the world, are not willing to stand up on behalf of these values, then certainly China, Russia, and others will not.
U.S. President Donald Trump has assured on a reuniting process in America after a divisive election, although the task has been seen by many as a huge daunting one following a series of threats and accusations made during the campaigns by Mr. Trump.
Donald Trump has already set himself apart from previous incoming presidents by holding a series of rallies around the country to thank his supporters. Trump also insists he wants to bring the country together after one of the most divisive election campaigns in recent history.
We will heal our divisions and unify our very, very divided country. When Americans are unified, there is nothing we cannot do. No task is too great, no dream too large.
But opposition to the incoming president remains intense and was on display during the recent electoral college voting in several states, including Florida.
Vote sanity and stability, no Trump.
And Wisconsin, where anti-Trump protesters made their presence known. Trump supporters are urging his opponents to give the new president a chance. Republican Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas.
I think President Obama was divisive. I'm hopeful President-elect Trump in office will continue to reach out with Congress, with different groups across the country, listen, see if we can't pull together as a country. That's my hope.
But former presidential contender Bernie Sanders is urging Democrats to resist Trump where they can.
When we stand together, Donald Trump and nobody is going to stop us. Let's go forward together. Thank you all.
How Trump chooses to deal with the challenge of unifying the country is important, says analyst John Hudak.
It is incumbent upon him to start building bridges to the nearly 70 million Americans who voted for someone else. That's a real challenge. It's not a challenge every president faces, and it will be an important challenge to see how the new president goes about that, if he goes about it at all, in the early months of his administration.
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
President George W. Bush faced a similar predicament in 2001 after winning a disputed election victory over Democrat Al Gore. In his inaugural address, Bush promised to bring the country together.
Our unity, our union, is the serious work of leaders and citizens in every generation. And this is my solemn pledge. I will work to build a single nation of justice and opportunity.
The public will likely welcome any Trump outreach on unity, says transition expert David Eagles.
We've been a divided country here. Obviously, the election showed it. It was very close, as expected. But I'm very hopeful. When you look at history in these periods of time, the American public has generally given a halo effect, if you will, on an incoming president to get their job done.
But any effort to ease the political bitterness from the election could be complicated right from the start by Trump's promise to repeal and replace President Barack Obama's signature achievement, his health care law.
And with that, we conclude the news roundup for this afternoon. Thank you for being part of the program. I'm Tunde Alabi. Enjoy the rest of your week. Continue to efforts to reach the African and other ethnic communities in the United Kingdom with greater impacts and create the platform to hear your silent and unheard views in this hugely growing community in the United Kingdom. Our channel, Ben TV, presents to you another live current affairs television program. Our focus on the program is to review and discuss issues around the diaspora community in the UK. The program offers you that unrestricted voice on issues affecting you in the UK. Join us live every Monday at 10 a.m. to 12 noon. Another business segment of Dialogue in Diaspora, 2 to 3 p.m. every Monday. But guess what? You know you can be part of the program. Just send us an email at bentelevisionuk@gmail.com. Dialogue in Diaspora, your voice, your opinion on our TV.